The silver pocket watch, a 10-year anniversary gift, still rested on the mahogany nightstand, ticking softly. Gabriel Velez promised he'd be home early from a meeting in the old Fourth Ward of Savannah, but when the clock passed midnight, I already knew the truth. Something terrible had happened. There were no texts, no calls, and his cell phone went straight to voicemail. My heart, Maya Sinclair, tightening with every beat, seemed to know the truth long before my mind allowed itself to understand. I walked into the Savannah Police Department precinct with a dry throat and shaking hands. I tried to sound firm as I explained that my husband hadn't come home and that this was completely out of character. The clerk handed me a bureaucratic form, treating it like just another file. In that instant, I understood that pain could also be bureaucratic. I described his clothing, his last known location, and every detail I filled in seemed to bury the idea that he would ever come back smiling. They asked if we had argued. 1,000 times no. I left the precinct holding a copy of the police report with a hollow ache. We plastered Savannah with his face, posters near the River Street tourist hub, at the domestic terminal, and at his usual coffee shop. Friends and family called every hospital and shelter, as if sheer persistence could defeat fate. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped, but it was always a cruel prank or a voice promising clues for dollars. Days passed, and the police search efforts yielded nothing. No traffic camera footage after 10:47 p.m., no bank transactions, no physical trace. The police asked for patience, but the word missing felt like a bottomless pit of poison, and the world kept functioning as if his absence didn't matter at all. I was forced to open his laptop and organize our joint accounts, finding unread emails and payment reminders. Every click was a stab, a new ghost of his paused life. Months passed like a long chain of gray days. My lawyer explained that the law was tired of waiting. We could legally start the process to declare a declaration of presumed death, administrative absence. Signing those papers felt like sealing his death while he was still alive. We held a symbolic memorial service at the community church, with no body, no certainty, but with a silence that felt too full. I prepared a symbolic box with photos and the unreturned silver pocket watch. Every dollar of the provisional life insurance payout that followed was a reminder that the system already considered him gone. I became the heir to an absence, and the weight of that debt I never asked for grew heavier with every passing day. A full year after Gabriel Velez vanished, I, Maya Sinclair, was riding the morning train line between Peachtree Center and Vine City. I was an automaton, going through the motions of life after the law had presumed my husband dead. "Excuse me, can I just get by?" a voice murmured behind me. My world shattered in a second. I instinctively turned and saw an unmistakable profile, a jawline I had kissed 1,000 times. It was him. Not a shadow, not a subconscious mistake, but my husband, Gabriel Velez, a year later, asking to pass on the train like any other stranger. My body reacted before my mind did. My vision blurred, my heart pounded like a war drum, and my hands started shaking. I stood motionless, watching him move a few steps away, oblivious to the storm he had just caused. He didn't look at me, as if I no longer existed. I got off at the next station and followed him like a shadow. He got off at a small station in Decatur with the routine calm of someone who does it every day. He walked unhurriedly, waving to a baker as if he were a regular customer. My legs felt weak, but I followed him down a narrow street where he entered a doorway without looking back. I stood there, trembling, in front of a door that sealed a year of pain. From the sidewalk, I watched him enter the building, pulling a key from his pocket as if he'd been doing it for years. He pressed the buzzer without hesitation, and a woman came down to open the door. It wasn't his mother, his sister, or anyone from our circle. They hugged and spoke in low voices. He smiled. The elevator swallowed them, and the door closed like a sentence. I stood paralyzed, having just watched a man I mourned as dead, living a different life that didn't include me. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I needed proof, not just the intuition broken by fear. A few days later, the detective handed me a dossier, photographs and zoom lens videos. My husband left that building every morning, took the train, and returned in the evening, always with the same woman in intimate, real, everyday moments. There was no doubt he was alive. He was there, and he was living as if he had never known me. I had photographic proof of Gabriel's new life with the woman, Naomi. The image of him smiling with her, living a routine life, was devastating. I needed the truth behind the betrayal, so I kept digging. The private investigator returned a few days later with a shocking medical truth that changed everything. Through contacts at a nearby hospital, the detective obtained medical reports. Apparently, my husband had been admitted months earlier after a public fall with a severe traumatic brain injury, TBI. He had been treated for weeks at Emory University Hospital and then referred for outpatient follow-up. The diagnosis included retrograde amnesia and temporal disorientation. Gabriel couldn't remember who he was, where he came from, or who he had left behind. According to the report, a woman, Naomi, who was passing by on the street, was the one who called the ambulance and then stayed with him during his admission. She offered him shelter, clothes, and help with formalities while he recovered, never knowing his true name. He wasn't listed on any official form beyond the nickname they gave him in the ER. Slowly, with her support, he began to reintegrate, learn new routines, and build a life with no prior references. He wasn't faking. He didn't avoid anyone and showed no signs of distress. He was living with Naomi as if she were his only history. What was a deep loss for me was a new existence without memory for him. The narrative fit. Someone collapses on the street, wakes up in a hospital without ID, and a woman becomes his only reference. He didn't lie about his identity because he didn't have one. I called the hospital from a blocked number. After giving the nickname he was now using and the admission date, they confirmed the trauma, the transfer to neurology, and his medical discharge. The neurologist noted persistent retrograde amnesia with profound gaps and difficulty recovering personal identity. He could remember general concepts and new tasks, but the past before the accident was completely erased. To him, I was just another stranger among millions. His silence was a consequence, not a choice. I was left with a cruel, unanswerable question. Was Naomi a life thief or a good person in the wrong place? She seemed sincere and had paid for rent, food, and medicine out of her own pocket, never touching our joint accounts. Yet, she also didn't immediately seek professional help when he couldn't recall his name. The truth was now a documented medical fact. Gabriel was suffering from retrograde amnesia due to a severe TBI. He was not a malicious betrayer, but a victim of his own mind. I, Maya Sinclair, was mourning an absence Gabriel never felt. I refused to believe that someone could forget the person they loved. Something inside me screamed that a memory had to remain somewhere in his body, or he was faking it. The rage blinded me because the uncertainty, was he a victim or an accomplice, tore me apart. I went back to our old house and collected photos, videos, letters, and texts. Everything that proved our life together had existed. I wanted to build a timeline that left no room for doubt. If he didn't remember,
I would remember for both of us. The family divide. The family was immediately divided by the amnesia diagnosis. Some blamed me for not finding him sooner, while others defended Naomi, the woman who helped him, thankful that someone saved him when no one else could. At family gatherings, no one spoke of him without tension. I was the official wife, but not the one who had been with him when he was hurting. I felt judged even by those who knew nothing. The media also picked up the story. The missing husband who reappeared without memory and with another life. I lost control of my own story, reading strangers calling me a martyr, exaggerated, or defending him as the victim. I went to confront Naomi at her house. She looked at me with surprise and compassion, not aggression. She claimed she didn't know anything, that she took him in because he was disoriented and hurt, and that she never investigated. She offered me coffee, but I couldn't swallow. I didn't hate her. She seemed sincere. The emotional vertigo. A mediator proposed a joint meeting, me, Naomi, a neurologist, and a clinical psychologist. Naomi accepted immediately. I hesitated, but I knew an open war would destroy everyone. Gabriel attended with a confused look, unsure why two women were talking about him, as if he were an invisible trial. During the session, we showed him old photos, our vacation in New Orleans, our wedding in Charleston, SC, the day we got our dog. He looked at them attentively, recognizing nothing. Then, at a picture of us in Piedmont Dock, his eyes welled up. He said he felt something, a pressure in his chest, a kind of emotional vertigo, but he couldn't name it. His body seemed to remember what his mind had erased. The physical evidence of his TBI and medical reports confirmed the amnesia was real. The amnesia was persistent. He could learn new tasks, but the past before the accident was completely erased. Even so, that tiny flicker of recognition was my only hope.
The medical truth confirming Gabriel's amnesia offered a fragile sense of closure to the confusion, but it intensified the legal peril. I, Maya Sinclair, had already processed a declaration of presumed death and was now faced with the possibility that the legally dead husband was alive and living with a woman who was a stranger. My lawyer recommended starting protective measures to secure the assets, review actions signed during his amnesia, and establish his civil status. We weren't seeking a lawsuit or punishment, we were seeking clarity and asset protection. Initial legal action. Asset preservation. I requested the court to preserve shared assets, block joint accounts, and review financial movements made in his name. This was hard to do on cold paper, talking about money while my marriage hung by an invisible thread. Official verification. We initiated a formal verification process, fingerprint comparison, DNA testing, and biometric data comparison to legally confirm that the amnesiac man was indeed the missing Gabriel Velez. The experts quickly confirmed the truth: identical DNA and fingerprints. The void documents. The lawyer warned about the possible nullity of documents signed during his amnesic state, contracts, authorizations, bank movements, because he was not mentally competent. I realized doing nothing and losing everything twice would have been worse. The emotional crossroads. I was still torn by the unanswerable question about Naomi. Was she a life thief or a good person in the wrong place? Answering this question was crucial to the legal approach. If she was an opportunist, we would fight for fraud. The emotional breakthrough came during a period of rising tension. Naomi made the incredibly difficult decision to step away for a while. The gesture of trust. She moved out, stayed at a friend's house, and facilitated all the requested documents. The journal.
Most powerfully, she gave me a journal Gabriel had kept during his amnesia, filled with doubts, scattered phrases, fears, and dreams. The renunciation. Later, in a gesture that disarmed all suspicion, Naomi signed a document renouncing any patrimonial claim. She made it clear that she loved him, but his well-being was more important than her desire. It was her way of closing the circle without drama, proving her intentions were rooted in humanity, not self-interest. That act changed the climate of everything. It was the first time I felt we weren't enemies, and it allowed us to move forward not with conflict, but with a civilized goal toward justice. With Naomi having gracefully stepped aside, the path was cleared for Gabriel to begin intensive cognitive rehabilitation. The focus was now on memory exercises, sensory stimulation, and emotional therapy. I, Maya Sinclair, attended some sessions, quietly watching him reconstruct what we had already lived. His effort was real. He regained practical skills and even remembered songs or automatic gestures. But the intimate, personal memories remained scattered. The emotional sparks, the scent of the past. I wore my jasmine perfume, the scent he knew from when we met. He would sometimes whisper that he dreamed of a woman who smelled like jasmine. The name. In one of the sessions, while looking at one of our albums, he suddenly said, "My name, Aisha," in a broken voice. He denied saying it afterward, but the therapist noted it. The feeling. Sometimes he would look at me and say, "You remind me of something good, but I don't know what." His body seemed to remember what his mind had erased. His emotions were there, floating without roots, and I desperately wanted to believe that something inside him was still mine. The final prognosis. The months of therapy led to a painful crossroads. The doctors had to deliver the final prognosis. They declared that Gabriel's memory would never fully return. Our wedding photos still looked like scenes from a stranger's life, and our private jokes no longer made him laugh. There were gaps that no exercise could fill. When asked what he wanted to do, Gabriel lowered his head and said he couldn't choose between two lives that didn't feel like his own. With me, he had memories he didn't remember. With Naomi, he had bonds he hadn't chosen. The law provided a mechanism to protect us from being perpetually suspended by this medical tragedy. The civil agreement was formalized at the county court. Asset protection, suspension of legal decisions by Gabriel until further medical review, and continuity in his treatment. The judge ruled that there was no crime, no fraud, no impersonation, and no bad faith, only a chain of medical and human circumstances. It was a bitter victory. I hadn't lost, but I hadn't won either.
Gabriel had been given his final prognosis. His memory would never fully return. When asked what he wanted, he confessed he was paralyzed, unable to choose between two lives that didn't feel like his own. With me, Maya Sinclair, he had memories he didn't remember. With Naomi, he had bonds he hadn't chosen. I knew I could not live in the eternal weight of waiting for a gesture or an ambiguous promise. The pain of being near him, yet still so far, was like living in a state of mourning without a body or a date. The act of self-respect. I made the brutal decision to regain my autonomy. I would not live as a martyr, a victim, or a heroine. Financial separation. I requested financial autonomy and separated my assets. I began to rebuild a life without depending on his emotional return, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. The new condition. If he chose me, it would have to be from the present, not from nostalgia. It hurt,
but it also set me free. Meanwhile, Naomi closed her own circle with grace. She signed a document renouncing any patrimonial claim, acknowledging that she did everything out of humanity, not self-interest. Her gesture disarmed all suspicion and proved her love was focused on his well-being. Forgiveness and the new bond. I learned to forgive without denying the pain. I didn't excuse everything, but I understood that no one chose what happened. Forgiving wasn't forgetting. It was deciding to live without the poison of resentment. Gabriel and I began a form of couples therapy adapted to his situation. No expectations, no pressure. We saw each other weekly, sharing memories, scents, objects, and songs, not trying to recover the past, but to invent a new language. Shared silence. We learned to recognize each other from scratch, without labels. We began to share simple gestures, having coffee in silence, walking through Piedmont Park. The serenity. There were moments when he looked at me with a serene familiarity, as if he didn't know who I was, but liked being close. He never recovered everything, but sometimes he would wake up and whisper words only we used. Fragments, reflections, sparks. I chose to stay while there was authentic love, even if it wasn't the same as before. We stayed together, but not as before. We were two people accompanying each other with care, respect, and new boundaries. Love was an open question every morning.
The final legal chapter closed. The judge ruled no crime, no fraud, no bad faith, only a chain of medical and human circumstances. I, Maya Sinclair, left the courthouse with a bitter feeling. Justice doesn't cure everything. The rebirth of a bond. Gabriel and I agreed to start couples therapy adapted to his amnesia. No expectations, no pressure. Just exploring whether something could be reborn. We weren't trying to recover the past, but to invent a new language. Learning anew. We began to share simple gestures, having coffee in silence, walking through Piedmont Park. There were moments when he looked at me with a serene familiarity, as if he didn't know who I was, but liked being close. Accepting the scars. He never recovered everything. Our wedding photos looked like scenes from a stranger's life, but sometimes he would wake up and whisper words only we used. Fragments, reflections, sparks. Forgiveness and final wisdom. I learned to forgive without denying the pain. I didn't excuse everything, but I understood that no one chose what happened. Forgiving wasn't forgetting, it was deciding to live without the poison of resentment. My emotional goal transformed. I would not live in the eternal weight of waiting for a gesture. I requested financial autonomy and separated my assets, beginning to rebuild a life without depending on his emotional return. This set me free. Gabriel eventually made his choice. He realized he couldn't choose between two lives, but he was starting to choose me. We stayed together, but not as before. We were two people accompanying each other with care, respect, and new boundaries. Love became an open question every morning. I gained a final wisdom. Love is not just shared memory, but also the will to be in the present, even if the recollections don't match. I stopped looking for signs of what was and concentrated on what is. I may never fully get back the man who was lost that night, but I recovered something more important, myself. And with that, I can finally close the story. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story.
On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.